A lot of times, you know, civilians get injured in the way of the insurgents or the enemy trying to blow something up on us, you know, in the middle of a marketplace. We've got some up armor that is protecting us, and they don't. You know, things happen to where a lot of bodily harm happens, and it affects you deeply. Whether you're doing the right thing, the guilt hits pretty hard whenever you think about what if it was your family. I was married twice, divorced twice, and it seemed like every time I came back from a deployment I was getting divorced. I lost a home, lost vehicles. I've been an alcoholic for some time now. You know, I'm a homeless veteran. You know, I was once a proud patriot, proud Marine. You know, in the end, I really don't see like an outcome that, you know, is justifiable for me giving up so much of my life, you know. And that's something that I'm struggling with. I'm still trying to find a purpose or a meaning.
Health science has identified a number of mental health disorders that may result from trauma, including PTSD and depression. Researchers have further concluded that acts of serious transgression, which are at odds with core ethical and moral beliefs, can cause moral injury. Moral injury is not a psychiatric disorder. Rather, it results from certain experiences which cause moral conflict during war. A team of VA psychologists, Drs. Brett Litz, Shira McEwen, and retired Navy psychiatrist Bill Nash, define moral injury as perpetrating, failing to prevent, or bearing witness to acts that transgress deeply held moral beliefs and expectations. Retired VA psychiatrist Jonathan Shea holds a more specific view that moral injury can occur when there's a betrayal of what's right by someone who holds a legitimate authority in a high-stakes situation.
And moral injury, this idea that there are things that happen in war that just gravely transcend expectations about how one behaves, how one is treated, and what one sees. Real transgressions of expectations about morality and ethics. So these two are no more important than life threat, but they're equally important to study and to treat. I just found that it was particularly important to appreciate the moral and ethical impacts of being a soldier, being a service person in time of war, long wars.
Moral injury in the sense that Litz, McEwen, and Nash have researched and write about it is probably always going to happen in war to some degree. But we can do something about moral injury that involves leadership malpractice, because we can improve the functional performance and the ethical performance of our leaders by improvements in policy, practice, and culture.
Having to do things that go against their core beliefs, having been betrayed by their leaders, the behavior that some of them exhibit when they're in the war zone, when they come back, they can't believe they did such things. And it's not always in the line of fire. It's among their own troops. They can't forgive themselves. They don't feel worthy of love. How could anybody love me after I've done what I've done, kind of thing. So there's guilt, there's shame.
We were setting mechanical ambushes, which is nothing more than a booby trap. And we would go out in the evening and set these ambushes up, and then hopefully the enemy would trip it. But as we were leaving, I watched a young child going down the trail we just booby trapped. And I prayed, send him another way. Go another way. I couldn't take my eyes off of him, and then when he got right where the ambush was, he was gone. Watching him head toward that trap, and I just couldn't do anything about it, and God didn't help me. All of a sudden, I wasn't this wonderful, nice, easygoing guy. I had been involved in the death of a child. And, oh yeah, I let that eat me up for a long, long time. I also felt I was never going to have a son because I had killed a boy in Vietnam.
Not only did they get hurt or see people get hurt, but they inflicted hurt. And those veterans normally have a deeper sense of guilt and shame than some of the others.
Some of the emotions that arise for individuals with moral injury are profound feelings of guilt or shame. And oftentimes there's a sense, because of their own upbringing, that they need to somehow find forgiveness. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. It's not condoning wrong. And rather it's a choice that people make in an effort to alleviate suffering.
Over time, and really we're talking about the long haul, they need to feel compassion for themselves. That good is possible, that forgiveness is possible. We want them to be jarred from their way of thinking, which is self-condemning. So if you've transgressed to a great degree, you feel unforgiven and unforgivable.
And those who have had values, strong moral values, that they have violated, this is where the moral injury comes in. Even though they have every right to kill because they're in war. They're trained to kill. But the Bible says, thou shalt not kill. And when they get back, the shame is overwhelming, the guilt is overwhelming.
I was really sheltered growing up, and my family was very religious. We were evangelical Christian. I was really proud to join the Navy because all the men in my family were Navy veterans. Not even 2 months after being stationed at the Defense Language Institute, I was raped in my barracks room by a sailor who I had gone on 2 dates with. So I felt really safe with him. And that really changed everything for me going forward. My view of the military, my view of safety, my view of God. After my rapist raped me, he said, I still think you're beautiful, Tia, and I'll pray for you. And he was a pastor's son. One of our dates was going to Bible study. And it was kind of like a cold bucket of water, so to speak. And I remember very clearly that moment sitting in my bed after I was raped, where my whole view of God and who God was, and that he would take care of me, that God was just completely changed in one instant. I experienced sexual harassment by my command for months and months on end. So I went through hazing. I finally cracked and slit my wrists, which landed me in a psych ward, and led to me getting out of the military. So when I came home, I had cuts, I had messed up wrist and was chain smoking and swearing and really pissed off. And my mom was like, who are you? What's my daughter? What happened to my daughter? And she wouldn't take no for an answer of me not wanting to talk about it. She grabbed me and was just like, talk to me. And finally I said in front of her and my stepdad, I was raped, and I slit my wrists. And my mom said, well, that's what happens when you step out from under God's umbrella. And then my stepdad said, you're ruined because you're not a virgin anymore. And the Navy, who I trusted implicitly and respected, didn't help me. My parents didn't help me. God didn't help me. And God wasn't there.
Anybody returning from war where their experience is one of moral injury are going to have a severe impairment of the capacity for trust. And when trust is devastated, it really destroys a person's capacity for a flourishing human life after war.
They see God as punitive, or where was God when all these bad things were happening? And if God is so good, why did he let all this happen?
Moral injury is a wound to the whole human critter, and the whole human critter at every instance is brain, mind, society, and culture.
He was a sergeant, and he kept showing up at these services. And I was playing for the Catholic and the Christian and the Jewish, and he was at each one of them. One day I saw him at all these services, and I asked him, I says, hey, wait a minute, what are you? He says, I'm an atheist. And we became very close friends after a while. He was cut in half by a machine gun, and I was right next to him. I began praying, and he was still conscious. The minute that I started praying over him, he said, Lou, he said, don't do this to me. He said, this is a dishonor to me. And all I'm doing is praying for his soul. And he said, I don't believe this. Let me die honestly as what I am. For years after this, I couldn't get over that. It affected me like a bullet hitting me. It was a shock.
While evidence-based treatments exist for PTSD, depression, and other psychiatric disorders, and intervention strategies for moral injury are being researched and developed on an ongoing basis, there's still much to be done.
They're probably doing some necessary things, but that there are some things that are not sufficiently covered to target morally injurious experiences, particularly the grave shame and self handicapping and the demoralization that may arise if you feel like you've transgressed and done something very morally wrong.
The safest thing, I think, to do, and this is what I practice, is to love them where they are. Create a safe space for them to cry, or let go, or to admit or talk about things that they haven't talked about with anyone else. They still have a life before them, and to think about how would they want to proceed from here.
Many experts agree that an interdisciplinary approach to treatment, helping veterans recover a sense of connectedness to a supportive community, and creating new meaning for life are essential to the healing process.
There are these self-conscious moral emotions, which are things like shame and guilt, and those lead.
What would need to happen is let's say a case conference with multiple disciplines. A social worker, a chaplain, a nurse, a psychiatrist, and a psychologist. And each has a different vantage point, and together the gestalt will create a better treatment plan and more insight into what might need to happen for the patient.
The first part of the treatment is really educating veterans about the physiological experiences that happen during killing. We talk about their sense of self in the present and how that might be related to the killing. We also talk about loss. We sit down with the veteran and have them write a letter of forgiveness. It can be to anyone, whoever they think that they have wronged, and so, and then we have them read it out loud in session, and that letter seems to be a important component of this treatment.
And I've thought about that and thought about killing you for a long time. I know you had a family.
We really work with the veteran to say, we've talked about all these areas in which you are having a hard time. Let's think about how you can make an amends plan to really move forward with your life.
Both mental health providers and chaplains should be willing to make referrals to the other discipline when they think it's appropriate. And so it would also be important for those professionals to collaborate, to communicate as they provide care for the veteran.
We have developed a therapy we call adaptive disclosure, and it's a unique evidence-based psychotherapy that's designed to target the three potentially injurious experiences of war: life threat, high fear, loss, especially guilt from loss, and moral injury. We ask them, what is the worst and most currently distressing experience? If that event is life threat and high fear, we use prolonged exposure. And if it's guilt related to loss, we do a different set of techniques. And then if it's a morally injurious experience, what we do is we have the Marine have a healing, hopefully healing conversation in imagination with a compassionate, forgiving moral authority in their lives. And this procedure is akin to confession. Chaplains, they are particularly expert at compassion and forgiveness. What is happening in the person's world, in their families, in their communities, and what is the plan for the long haul?
One of the things that's a common experience for veterans struggling with moral injury is a sense of feeling isolated and alienated from the world. And so in terms of recovery, having activities that you can do with other people, engaging with people in a healthy and enjoyable way, we think is one element of making that kind of connection to a life that's worth living.
Recovery from moral injury happens only in community. Really effective community is the community of one's peers. The veterans do the heavy lifting with each other, and that's where recovery from moral injury takes place.
I'm a part of the dog training program here, which is Paws for Purple Hearts. We train them to be able to help veterans with limited mobility, so the dogs help them with things like turning on light switches and opening up doors that they may have a struggle with. It's such a great cause, and that kind of brings me peace and content. That's a big part of my life right now, and I guess the process of me getting better.
Today I volunteer through the chaplain's office. I'll go up on the wards and I'll talk to the guys, but I will never, 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 under any circumstances, try to convince anybody to feel the way I feel. And that's why music is important to me. Religious music is important because it gives that comfort.
When we talk about meaning making, we're thinking about the things in life that make life worth living. So finding ways to live a life that matters, to feel that the way that you spend your time every day adds value to other people. And so helping veterans with moral injury re-engage in life and re-engage with other people becomes extremely important.
The spiritual piece is the piece that makes the mental health piece work. The medical part work, the physical work, brings it all together. It's a three-legged stool. Without one of them, the stool doesn't stand.
We remember 9/11 every year, and For me, that reminds me of my discharge every year, and that's really painful. But it's also a personal anniversary for me, and to put a positive swing on it, it's the anniversary of how my service to our country changed, because I've been working with veterans and speaking out ever since. So my service is not what I planned, but I've been able to make something good out of it, which for me, I guess I found an element of peace there.
There were other people just like me. That was the first thing that I realized when I began my treatment, and specifically the PTSD program here at Menlo Park. ACT is my favorite, acceptance commitment therapy. You know, my mind still tells me the same stuff it told me 40 years ago, but I know how to process it, and I know how to tell it thank you for the thought, but I think I will move on in another direction.
I've been in the VA system, healthcare system, since 2002, and honestly, I don't think I'd be as functional as I am if it wasn't for my continued VA healthcare.
I know I can't change those things that happen. It's only part of my history now.
With good spirituality and good psychology and mental health, what you can't cure can be transcended. You can get beyond it.
I like to use the adage that they say in boot camp of "you're stronger than you think you are."